I usually tell my patients to look for patterns that stick. If a fatigue or cravings show up most days or for more than a couple of weeks, that definitely is concerning. Or if you need caffeine or sugar just to get through the day. It's not normal. Your body's asking for attention before it starts breaking down. The emotional burnout often comes first before you get into physical challenges or something else, or any other check engine lights. Feeling unmotivated, if you're feeling overwhelmed or irritable or just mentally exhausted and not able to concentrate or cloudy thinking. And these are all early signs that your stress system is overworked. When you're tired or when you're fatigued, your cells aren't using the fuel efficiently. It's a sign of early insulin resistance. It's a sign that your mitochondria may not be working well. When you get belly fat, that's a sign of high cortisol, and that imbalance gives you the insulin resistance. When you're not sleeping well, that could be from sleep apnea, from weight gain or other reasons, or it could be because your sleep hygiene is affected, or eating too late, or doing things that you shouldn't be doing. If we brush them off or ignore them, we double up our future medical costs and we shorten the lifespan, and both health span and lifespan. People who develop diabetes, they spend almost $13,000 more per year compared to somebody who does not have diabetes. You lose about 7 to 10 or 7 to 12 years in your life expectancy if diagnosed with diabetes in midlife.
Wow.
So I think that's a big cost to pay for brushing off the symptoms earlier on.
Welcome back to Lower the Dose, Season 1, Diabetes and Metabolic Wellness. In our first episode, we heard the story behind Lower the Dose, how Dr. Rangi turned a lifetime of medical experience into a movement for prevention. Today, we're diving into one of the most powerful lessons she teaches her patients, learning to recognize your body's check engine lights. Because before every diagnosis, there are whispers: fatigue, cravings, sleep changes, belly fat, or that frustrating moment your labs say normal, but you still don't feel normal. So if you've ever thought, I just don't feel like myself today, this episode is for you. I know I'm excited for this because I tend to feel like that. I know everyone has felt like that. So it's a great episode. I'm excited. Hi, Dr. Rangi. How are you?
Hi, Leila. I'm doing well, thank you. Good to see you again.
Of course. Good to see you also. So let's just jump into it. And I'm curious to know, how do you define that moment when your body first starts saying, hey, something's off, something doesn't feel right?
Yeah, I feel those signs don't happen right away. By the time we recognize, we waited for a while. Do you know what I mean? The check engine light is something that has been coming, like blinking in different ways and forms, and we've been overlooking that. It could be in the form of being tired, fatigued, feeling hungry all the time, or having sugar cravings, or it could be just brain fog, not able to think right, or it could be, weight gain or abnormal blood tests that came up suddenly, or sleep disturbances, very common to ignore. If we can recognize those and think now is the time to take care of ourselves, that'll be the best thing.
Absolutely. Paying attention to all those little things that may not seem like a big deal, but those small changes are definitely something to be aware of. And I know you often say that chronic disease doesn't just appear overnight, right? It's kind of a slow buildup of ignored signals. So what are some of the earliest check engine lights that you tend to see in your patients?
So, Leila, I think the check engine is a metaphor in health that refers to, often early and subtle signs or symptoms, such as I mentioned earlier, fatigue, cognitive changes or brain fog, weight gain, or your abnormal labs, or effect on your sleep, or irritability. It could be many things. Scientifically, this concept aligns with recognition of early changes or early stage of chronic disease. This is kind of a window for early intervention and prevention. So very important for us to recognize these symptoms. And not everybody may have the same kind of symptoms. We can sometimes detect things on biomarkers or the blood test that we might do. Or it could be because of some family history, you might need to get screened earlier. But usually it's overall presentation. It could be your symptoms, or it could be something that we need to specifically look in your case to start looking at things earlier.
Absolutely. And like you said, a lot of these can be common. So fatigue, brain fog, sugar cravings, they all sound common and somewhat relatively normal almost. So how can someone tell when they're normal versus actual warning signs?
Great question. I usually tell my patients to look for patterns that stick. If a fatigue or cravings show up most days, or for more than a couple of weeks, that definitely is concerning. Or if you need caffeine or sugar just to get through the day, it's not normal. Your body's asking for attention before it starts breaking down. So we need to look at those sort of signs and patterns and take their attention and talk to our doctors.
Absolutely. So looking for that pattern and repetition and length of time that you might be feeling like something's off. But
Mhm.
why do you think that some people tend to either miss or ignore these signals until things get somewhat serious?
Because we like to blame them to something, right? You might think about, maybe I'm aging, maybe it's because I am work overload, or there's a stress going on. Um, they seem very ordinary, right? Because we get used to just managing, our
Mhm.
day or whatever we are going through. But when we normalize dysfunction, we delay the action until there's a diagnosis, right? So awareness turns a light on early. So we need to be aware that what could be normal aging, and where do we need to intervene, and what do we need to bring to the attention so we can pick up the signal. Yeah, because those are signs that happen long before the crisis happens. So we don't want to overlook those, because it could be years earlier before you get the disease or some kind of health crisis.
Absolutely. And when we talk about these check engine lights, if you will, and those early signals and symptoms, what would you say are maybe the five most common check engine lights you wish that everyone could or would recognize early on?
Fatigue is definitely one of them. Belly fat, sleep problems, sugar cravings, and brain fog. I think those are the most common ones that I get to hear.
Yeah, those definitely sound common. I feel like
Yeah,
everyone feels a little bit of that at some
yeah.
point. So
And
it
you can
is
also think about this, that if two or more are showing up together, that is definitely something to look into and check what's going on inside.
okay. Yeah, that's a really good point because sometimes you can feel one of these on a regular
Mhm,
basis and not think it's an
mhm.
issue. But if two or more are apparent, then that's definitely a big indicator, it sounds like. And for each of those that you mentioned, so for fatigue, belly fat, sleep disruption, sugar cravings, brain fog, what's actually happening underneath that physiology? What are they feeling?
So
Like what's actually happening?
when you're tired or when you're fatigued, your cells aren't using the fuel efficiently. It's a sign of early insulin resistance. It's a
Mhm.
sign that your mitochondria may not be working well. When you get belly fat, that's a sign of high cortisol. Again, insulin stores fat around the waist. So that's sign that you have too much insulin in your body, and that imbalance gives you the insulin resistance. When you're not sleeping well, that could be from sleep apnea, from weight gain or other reasons, or it could be because um, your sleep hygiene is affected, or eating too late or doing things that you shouldn't be doing, but that may not let you sleep at night well, and that leads to chronic rise in cortisol, and that can affect your um, rest at night, and of course daytime sleepiness and fatigue. When you're having sugar cravings, they're usually from your roller coaster of your insulin and glucose levels, and sugar spikes right after you eat, because now you have developed insulin resistance and your body's not able to manage the sugar well. And it takes a while before it goes down. And when it goes down, then you drop too fast because you have almost so much of buildup of insulin. So these yo-yo effects of sugar, high rise of sugar and low sugar leads to cravings. And in regards to brain fog, it's usually because of inflammation, poor sleep, again, blood sugar fluctuations. All those things are probably leading to these symptoms. These symptoms aren't random. They're very much connected with each other, like I just mentioned, how insulin resistance is connected to, is influenced by lack of sleep, and lack of sleep influences your cortisol level. So our bodies got such a good rhythm that we are distorting that rhythm by our lifestyle.
Honestly, yeah, it's interesting to someone who doesn't practice medicine to realize how connected they really are. And I think that's so important for anyone who might be feeling these ways because you don't often make that connection yourself. So it's very helpful to see and understand that they are actually very much so connected. And like you said earlier, it's easy for people to assume that this might be part of the aging process or I'm not feeling my best because I'm getting older and that's normal. But what's actually the risk of brushing these signs off or just assuming they're, just getting older symptoms?
Yeah, Layla, if we brush them off or ignore them, we double up our future medical costs and we shorten the lifespan, and both health span and lifespan. That means for the years you're going to live, you're going to be not as well, and the lifespan gets shorter as well. If you have chronic health conditions like diabetes, can affect life by 7 to 12 years, depending on the control and what kind of diabetes and your specific situation. People who develop diabetes, they spend almost $13,000 more per year compared to somebody who does not have diabetes. So I think that is a huge cost to pay. And like I mentioned, you lose about 7 to 10 or 7 to 12 years in your life expectancy if diagnosed with diabetes in midlife. So I
Wow,
think that's a big cost to pay for brushing off the symptoms earlier on.
absolutely. That's definitely a drastic number in terms of money and in terms of age and in terms of what you can potentially lose from your lifespan. So definitely is super important to get looked at early on for these, things that seem super common. But once someone starts to notice these signs, whether it's one of them or multiple, what lab markers do you look at to confirm early risk early on?
Yeah. Um, we use different lab tests for individual patients, and that's why I talk about more precision-based medicine, because I don't want to make one size fit all. Well, we start with simple tests that everybody can get. We should look into fasting glucose, A1C, and fasting insulin level. And then I like to look at triglycerides to HDL ratio, and ApoB for lipids or cholesterol. We also look at liver enzymes because some of these people get earlier on fatty liver disease, and that is also associated with how the long-term progression is going to be and your outcomes. And then, of course, blood pressure, your waist circumference. We also check highly sensitive CRP, which is a inflammation marker. And also sometimes uric acid can give us an indication as well. You don't need dozens of tests, you just need the right combination for the right patient, whoever we are working with. Um, and a lot of times it's a mix of your overall presentation, your risk assessment, and your blood work. They both help us understand how to handle things.
How does your precision 30 testing tie all of this together to create a clear picture of metabolic health?
So Precision 30 is something that we have named into our initial evaluation when we have patients that we evaluate for wellness. And what we do is we have 30 biomarkers that we test in most patients when we screen them initially. And that connects all the symptoms, your lifestyle pattern and lab all into one map to understand what's your metabolism, how much inflammation you're having, what's your oxidative stress, and things like that. It helps me to see what are individual person's unique drivers, like hormones, their stress, how's that affecting their body. And based on all that, we can develop a personalized plan for the patient. Now, we also do sleep mapping. We also do continuous glucose monitor. We look at heart rate variability. So we do a lot of different kind of parameters or biomarkers that we match with the symptoms and understand what your body's screaming for or asking for, so we can attend to that.
Absolutely. And you mentioned a lot of that is their lifestyle as well. So this is an assessment you do with blood work and then just consulting with the patient to really understand their everyday life cycle as well.
Yeah, we do these after we meet the patient first. We do the risk assessment, try to understand what is their absolute risk of having a heart disease in the near future. What is the risk of their diabetes or prediabetes? And once we map that out based on their presentation, we order the right tests. And once we have both the initial presentation, which gave us a roadmap, and the biomarkers and the labs and everything together, that gives me a complete blueprint of, what I need to do for that specific person to take care of their health.
That's really great that you have that one-on-one experience with the patient to really understand who they are and their lifestyle just beyond blood work. I think that that's super important for the patient and for you as a physician to be able to really treat them properly and accordingly and get a full comprehensive view. And what would you say are three simple evidence based habits that lower insulin resistance and stabilize metabolism without major lifestyle overhaul?
A great question. And I think that is something pretty much everyone can do. And that's not very unique to individuals. Everybody can sleep well, right? We deserve to sleep well. So regular sleep schedule definitely helps tremendously. Um, Two, slow breathing can help as well. Whenever you're anxious or during daytime, to just calm the stress, you can do the slow breathing. 10 minutes walk after every meal is definitely very helpful because it lowers the glucose and lowers the stress as well if you go for a walk. Um, and the last one I would suggest is maybe adding protein and fiber in your diet and making sure that is consistent with every meal and keeping your glucose steady and keeping your reduces the cravings as well. So those are simple things anybody can do. Those are tiny habits that create powerful momentum.
Absolutely. Those do seem pretty simple, quick, everyday things that we may or may not already be doing, but I think putting the emphasis on it and being more conscious about it can definitely be helpful. I've actually struggled with insulin resistance myself in the past. So I'm listening, I'm taking notes as well to kind of understand little habits that can definitely help. And it's great that you do this with your patients because I know not all physicians really go through the one on one asking about lifestyle, giving little tips and tricks to really incorporate in your everyday life to really help and get better and not just a prescription or just a quick visit, just actually being comprehensive of their whole life and including little daily things to help. So that's definitely really, I think, good tips. And if anyone's listening who's going through that, that's something I think everyone can do. Absolutely. And how long does it typically take for someone to really start seeing improvement once they really start to begin addressing these early cues?
Layla, the energy and the cravings can improve within 2 weeks. Okay, once you start getting very regular with your disciplined plan. Um, and then comes your waist circumference, your blood pressure, your vitals. They can take up to 4 to 6 weeks sometimes. Um, and the blood test can sometimes take up to 2 to 3 months. Um, Body responds quickly when you listen early. So I think that's the key. You got to pay attention to take care of things early, so we can slow that progression or whatever damage that was going to happen, we can slow it down. And that's when things are reversible. I get asked lot of times, can you help me reverse my diabetes? Only if I catch it early, you
Mhm.
know, um, very early. And then if you get it later, we can bring it into remission or stabilize it without medication, but you have memory in your cells. And anytime you lose your, don't follow the lifestyle or don't do what you're supposed to do, you can get that back again. So very important to recognize earlier on so that you can reverse your chronic disease markers earlier on and you can stay stable without medications.
And it also sounds like being proactive versus reactive is also something that would go a long way before having to reverse anything, just really being intentional and proactive about any small signs and not waiting for things to build up at all.
True.
I know a lot of people tend to get anxious when they hear any kind of risk about diabetes or even pre-diabetes. So, how do you help patients reframe that fear into action and curiosity?
Yeah, I see a couple different kind of people. One is they're so scared of going to the doctors that they would try their best not to go unless they really have a problem. And that might be too late. So we got to think about, again, something I mentioned earlier. It's like financial planning. You got to plan your health. You got to design your health. If you wait till things break down, then you're going to have more work to do, more repair to do. So we really need to change that mindset. And instead of thinking that I'm in trouble, or we got to think about that my body is giving me some feedback, my body's talking to me. That mindset change has to happen. That keeps you curious and calm and allows you stress hormones to calm down and also supports and helps with healing. So I think just being curious and just being proactive and being um, partner with your provider to understand how can I best design my health for future is the mindset you need to have.
So, many people tend to get anxious when they hear the risk about prediabetes or diabetes, right? So, how do you help patients reframe that fear into action and curiosity?
Fear freezes people. It just shuts down the problem solving and the motivation. So people, instead of thinking how to take care of themselves, they just withdraw. And I don't think that that's the right move. I usually tell my patients risk assessment is not punishment. It's more to assess earlier for information's sake so we can take care of you. The moment you understand what your body's saying, at least you can take care of it and you can act, right? And instead of thinking that, I'm in trouble or my body's not doing well, I would reframe it and I would say my body is giving me feedback and I need to listen and take care of it. So that single shift of being more curious and more wanting to take care of yourself can really turn your fear into curiosity and curiosity into action.
Absolutely. And what emotional check engine lights should people watch out for? We've talked a little bit about the physical aspect, but emotionally, are there any specific check engine lights that people really need to watch out and be curious about within themselves?
That is so true. I'm glad you asked that question because I personally went through that. The emotional burnout often comes first before you get into physical challenges or something else, or any other check engine lights. Feeling unmotivated, if you're feeling overwhelmed or irritable or just mentally exhausted and not able to concentrate or cloudy thinking. And, um, these are all early signs that your stress system is overworked. You're just trying to go into the overdrive mode. And what that does is your cortisol stays high. That gets in the way of your sleep. And if you're not sleeping well, then you're feeling more hungry and you may eat at wrong times and your metabolism may start to pay the price. So certainly emotional fatigue is every bit as a real physical fatigue. And we need to recognize that. It's your nervous system flashing yellow light or check engine light asking for rest or reset.
Absolutely. And when you say rest and reset, I think those are two really important things that people probably are not doing that's resulting in this. Would you recommend those tips you mentioned earlier as the best ways to rest and reset? Deep breaths, walks, protein.
Not just that, we had talked about walking after meals and having
Hmm.
protein and fiber with your meals, and also having better sleep, and maybe having the reset breathing that we talked about to calm down your stress mechanism. But here, what I'm talking about is you need to learn your emotional signals. Why are you feeling overwhelmed? Could this be the sign of early burnout? Or is it early sign of depression? And in this case, you really need to understand, and there's one word that comes to mind is pause and reassess. What I really like to tell my patients is, if you're feeling that way, if you're feeling overwhelmed, try to put a pause and try to understand what is leading up to this. What are the reasons why you're feeling overwhelmed? Why are you feeling the symptoms of feeling emotional burnout? And then you got to pause, because unless you put a pause, that will go on as a circle of motion and you never get out of it. And then once you reassess, then you need to start pivoting and changing your direction. If it's too much work, then you need to change your work hours, or if it's a personal reasons for fatigue from emotional exhaustion from caregiving, you need to reassess that and understand where can you change things. So I personally think putting a pause and reassessing and creating some boundaries definitely helps you reset.
Absolutely. Those are definitely really, really good tips and great advice. And you've seen countless patients who have ignored early fatigue or cravings only to then develop prediabetes. So, are there any patient stories that come to mind?
There are many, but I'll try to share some. Over the years, I've seen many patients who have ignored some, just the subtle signs, and others have ignored the obvious signs. For example, there have been people who, there was an engineer I was seeing, and his blood pressure used to be high. And I would often tell him to watch his salt, and he may need medication after he works on his lifestyle. Now, he had genetics playing a big role. He had family history of heart disease and high blood pressure. He would ride bike all the time. He would exercise a lot, but his blood pressure was still high. So in that case, it should be okay for us to take medication if we need to take. And he didn't want to. And even though I believe in lowering the dose of stress and medications and prescriptions, but in certain cases, you need to take medication. And in this case, he ended up having a stroke. Totally preventable. I wish we had done something earlier, but I was just not able to convince him. There are a couple other patients that come to mind. There was one person who had fatty liver disease from excessive weight. We encouraged to lose weight, and she never took it serious, and she went into irreversible liver failure. We used to think alcohol was the biggest reason for fatty liver disease, or liver failure, sorry. Now we know it's not the alcohol, it's a fat that's leading to liver failure. So we really need to take that serious. And we noticed that some people, in spite of having a lot of weight, may not have fatty liver disease. Others are lean and have relatively more visceral fat or fat around the organs, and they get more fatty liver disease. So that's why we cannot say one size fits all, and we need to recognize individual risk factors and try to understand um, how to give that precision, personalized care for individual patients. Other than that, there have been a lot of patients with heart attacks, sudden heart attacks that I've seen over time who have ignored the early subtle signs of check engine. So I think it's very important for people to recognize earlier signs so they can, one, reverse, two, prevent crisis, and three, save cost over time and feel the best they can.
Absolutely. And what's a mindset shift that you hope this movement inspires with patients and in medicine?
Yeah, I think looking at being curious, you need to be curious, you need to be proactive, and you need to learn. You need to, if you have a family history of diabetes, do anything and everything to equip yourself. Start getting tested earlier. Learn what your options are. Even though you may optimize your lifestyle, genetics may be a matter of time. You may be able to delay your diagnosis by 5, 10 years, but because of your genetic risk profile, you might still get it. And if you get it, then that may not be the time to fight not taking medications. So I think working with someone who can be a partner in your healthcare, working with someone who can understand your body, and having that relationship where you understand what needs to be done at the right time rather than just waiting for prescription or no prescription. There's so much more we can do in between with the check engine light, that we can risk stratify. We can help people understand how they can take care of themselves and delay the progression of chronic disease if they have genetic risk factors, or how to prevent crisis.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I think you've given us so much information and knowledge about checking your engine lights internally, paying attention to your body emotionally, physically, paying attention to the symptoms where you may think it's okay to brush off, but really taking the time to understand that there could be something going on and there's so much that you can prevent. So, thank you so much. I think this was, like I said, super informative. I know I've learned a lot, and I'm sure our listeners have as well. And if anyone is feeling like this and would like to talk to Dr. Rangi, you can book your free 15-minute discovery call with her. It will be in the show's notes. But thank you so much again for really helping us see that the body is always talking. We just have to learn to listen. The check engine light isn't there to scare you, it is there to save you. So if today's episode made you think twice about your own check engine lights, take that next step. Book your 15-minute discovery call with Dr. Rangi, and the link, like I mentioned, will be included in the notes. And remember, you can't always control life's pace, but you can lower the dose and raise your life. So thank you again, Dr. Rangi. I cannot wait to speak to you at our next episode. And this has been Lower the Dose, and we'll see you next time.